jolly old Perth in Western Australia, and Carol's in, is it sunny London today, or is it a bit cloudy?
No, it's very overcast here and a bit miserable.
Oh, that's a bit of a disappointment. Last week when we were there, it was nice, hot and sunny. I was a bit worried about getting a bit of a sunburn. Anyway, and Willem, hopefully you can hear us okay, wherever you are. It's good to have you on board. What we're going to do is just do a quick run through people skills, and really, if you have any comments or criticisms, great to hear. So we do these sessions. You're in South Africa. Whereabouts are you in South Africa, Willem? In Johannesburg, Pretoria, or good old Cape Town, maybe? Oh, okay, Joburg. Okay, well, that's good. Probably sunny today, although chilly, I would imagine. Last bit of August. One of the challenges always with engineers and engineering types, whether they're technicians or technologists, is we tend to focus on all the technical skills. So that's our big focus. But really, in fact, if you're looking for promotion, working with your staff, motivating, it's all about people. And in fact, if you go and look at employment requirements for employers, they'll generally list soft skills as one of the requirements. Because unfortunately, soft skills are very, very hard to acquire at a high level. And technical skills, unfortunately, you gain. And then next week, of course, there's a different version of the internet there or different technical specification, and you have to relearn. So it's a challenging old world there. But engineers with good technical skills are good, but with soft skills, working with people, you are well ahead. And in fact, I always talk about my boss. I had this incredible boss, and his people skills were absolutely unsurpassed. He was an engineer, and I was a junior engineer, but his people skills were unsurpassed, and he went right to the top and ended up as one of the senior managers in the De Beers Diamond organization. So, and an absolute inspiration with his people skills. And he always used to emphasize that. So I've been involved with engineering for a long time. And as Carol says, this little presentation is there's about 40 or 50 people who want a copy. So we'll shoot it out, and it'll last about 20 minutes. And hopefully in that time, I can get some concepts across. And believe me, I learn every day with people. Only today, I learned a new way of handling sort of disagreements. We had a board, academic board meeting, and Steve, my colleague, very adroitly dealt with a objection from our chair of the academic board, and I thought, this is amazing, just dealing with people. So basically he stated the problem, and then of course worked with the chairman to come up with a solution, and he did it very cleverly. Basically very good people skills, so you can learn every day. And Marion Roberts would be a good example of people skills being particularly important. So the topics we just really want to cover here in a very, very short order are, first of all, setting strategic goals, the 4 behavioral styles, which I always find absolutely amusing, but they're always worth restating, and then just a few comments about communications, motivating your team, and conflict resolution. Just a few little pointers there. Obviously, I can't change you in the space of 20 minutes, but we can talk about these things. So personal leadership, obviously, we have cause and effect. For every cause, there's a specific result that occurs. So you have the effect side of the equation. I cannot, I have to, I had no choice, if only. In other words, I'm just a victim. I've got no chance in life. Or you've got the cause side of the equation, which I love, is the can do. I take control of my life. I know I've lost a leg or I've been involved in a serious accident, but I am in control. And that is the story of life. And no one likes victims. And certainly if you're a victim, you really do have challenges. And look, certainly life is full of challenges. We have challenges all the time. And some of them are horrendous, like, you just really don't know how to deal with them. And certainly they do cause us to pause for a moment. But you have to take ownership. That's one of the most important things. And again, this is just, emphasizing this. Try and be, do, have, make things happen. A few tips for setting goals. Really, all of us should have goals. I write my goals down at the beginning of the year and I try and stick to them every day. I look at them. Really try and make goals align with your values. So, you can't try and do things which you're not. So if you're not a person, don't try and twist yourself around to be that person. Try and live with who you are. Try and understand who you are. Begin with the end in mind. Look at what you want to target. Project yourself into the future. And try and write down the things that you want to achieve this year. What do you want to do? They may be very simple things. They may be very complicated things. They're private, but you need to create that. And then you need to visualize with a storyboard how you're going to achieve those things. Then of those 10 things, take the 3 most important things and try and focus on those. Ask yourself good questions. Try and do one project at a time. Again, multitasking, very, very hard. Always, power is in focusing with one task at a time. And then obviously, regular review of goals, as I say, every day is a good one. Just quick flick through in your diary. This is what I want to do. So here's a few suggestions on creating goals. Create your own goals, a few little things there. We'll give these slides out. And here's a suggestion on leading people. You need to understand everyone before you can lead them. So now, just to talk a few minutes about this behavioral model, which I don't know if you're familiar with, a guy called Jung in Marston, very famous psychologist, and they've put this model together. And it's quite an interesting model, actually. And you could look at it in different ways and say, oh, well, that's, different ways of doing things, and you can look at things. But this model is actually, I always used to laugh at it and say this is rubbish, but it actually is a very good representation of who we are. And this says basically we have 4 behavioral styles. No one can hide from these behavioral styles. We all have them. And Carol, I might add, you have them as well. So dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. And I'll explain what they are in a tick. So we all have variations of those. Carol included, I might add, the variations of those, and some of them are stronger than others. But it's really good to consider who you are, which of these, and there's a whole assessment which we've got, which you can assess yourself, score yourself. But the point is just to say that these are around, and just to give you an example of what they are. You have dominant, which, as you'd expect, is the guy that's high ego strength, the guy that's in charge. So he or she is it. Now, before you say, oh, hang on, who's the good one? Which is the good trait? No, they're all good or bad. They're all equal. They're just an observation of who you are. They're not saying this is good or bad. So dominant is the person that's sort of running the show, and perhaps is a little bit overly ambitious. So you probably can think of some politicians, such as, I won't mention too much detail, but the president of you-know-where is probably got a very strong dose of dominance. The next one is influencing, inspiring, very enthusiastic type person, persuasive, talkative, creative, just a great person, perhaps quite keen to be one of the mana, one of the boys in town. So perhaps it's not always useful, but certainly very optimistic about life. Everything's going to work out. The other one is compliant, which is probably quite a good one when you want to have someone running, doing an assessment of a plant for safety. So compliant. In other words, accurate, analytical, conscientiousness, systematic. So those are the sort of things that you have with compliance. And the final one is with stable. And this sort of person, and you see some characteristics overlap with compliant, but this person is good listener, team player, possessive, steady, predictable, friendly, and you can depend on them. They're loyal. So basically we have all combinations of all those, and when you look around at your team or your colleagues, you will see various combinations of these. What's the point of knowing about this? Well, it just gives you an idea of who we're all structured. And in fact, if you're setting up a team, you'll probably put people to look at them carefully and see which type of behavioral patterns they have, and then you'll stick them in particular roles. So you're not going to put a compliant person into running the team, and you're certainly not going to make a dominant person doing compliance, meticulous sort of work. So you're going to try and look who's got what. So here's a typical example of the various behaviors, which is probably a little bit of a joke sometimes, but they've got the various behavioral traits, and then they say, bang, here we go, this is how they behave. So here's a good example here. For example, statements. Dominant, D, is trust me, I'm in control. I, influence, like me. S, assure me. And C, compliance, inform me. So you've got different behaviors, and they're just trying to give you an example there, compliant or stable. So stable, obviously, you want something nice, solid, predictable. So, and you can see the sort of ways of control. The dominant person's force of character, I'm in charge. Influence, verbal persuasion, I'm going to try and persuade you to do the right thing. So, for example, a salesperson would be a good role there. S is slowing down, and compliance is sort of give me more information. As we said here, compliance, stable is sort of good listener, team player, and of course compliant is accurate, analytical, etc. So those are sort of the different things. So basically, we all have these characteristics, and they're worth bearing in mind when you're considering a team and also when you're considering yourself. So just to go on to the next point, I just wanted to talk about effective communication. So there's just 3 other items I wanted to chat about. If I can go back to the beginning here. Hopefully you can see these slides, Willem. Just jumping back to them in a very slow way. Here I should be a bit faster, actually. I think there's a faster way. Yeah, so basically I want to just, the last 2 points I just want to talk about are communications, motivating your team, and conflict resolution. Really spend a bit of time on conflict resolution, which I find very interesting. Oops. Sorry, so let me just jump to sorry to jump around like that. So effective communications. One of the difficulties I always watch with people is communications in the engineering world. And honestly, it's always a mishmash. Engineers are notoriously poor at communicating, and I'm probably one of them, as Carol knows. So here's just a few tips with communications, because if you can communicate well, you can really run the world. And unfortunately, engineers aren't renowned for communications. And it's always about trying to get information across in a very simple way, using the good old KISS principle. And if I may ask you guys, what does KISS principle stand for? Carol?
Keep it simple, isn't it?
You're missing one most important word.
Is it keep it simple, stupid? I can't remember the final one.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol. You get a gold star there. Yeah. So really, honestly, it's best to keep communication simple. Don't try any big words. Don't try fancy jargon. Just simple and get it through. And that's honestly the name of the game. And I always despair when you have an engineer and you say, please explain this to me, and you get this massive jargon, complicated explanation of the internal combustion engine. You say, for God's sake, I just wanted a simple explanation how you have wear on your rings or whatever. And they go into all this massive detail. So really keep it simple. First thing is know what you're going to tell, you're going to transfer across to the other person. Make sure the person's at the same technical level. And I always maintain, no matter whether you're a nuclear physicist, if you know your craft, you should be able to explain it at the level that you would explain to your grandmother. So if you can't explain to your grandmother that detailed use of the thorium rods or whatever in the power station, nuclear power station, then you probably don't understand it. So you really got to make sure it's simple explanation. But by the same token, to get maximum value, you've got to make sure you understand the technical level of the person you're communicating with. Guard against yes mentality. If you're explaining something to someone, don't assume they understand. 99% of the time you'll be horrified that they did not understand what you're saying, but to keep you happy, they said, yes, I understand. But the quickest way to test is by a simple question or a little confirmatory, presume you understand this, and then the guy comes back and you know immediately he had no idea of what you said. Understand the culture. That's always horrific for me when I'm in the Middle East or somewhere and I'm explaining something. I'm always absolutely traumatized when I realize that that person at the other side hadn't got a clue. They were thinking of things totally different. So again, graphics is a wonderful way to illustrate points, and I honestly believe we don't use them enough. A simple diagram is worth millions of words. Try and use those all the time. Learn from other great communicators. Always try and listen to the gurus out there and see how they present things. One of the finest presentations I've ever attended was about 10 years ago in Sydney. This guy had come in from the States, and he was going to do a presentation to all of us. So we were all like, oh, here we go. He was doing a presentation on diesel power. But what he did was he did an incredible presentation because he started off with about 10 minutes. He presented for 10 minutes. Then he got all of us in the room. There were about 100 of us. He gave us all white boards, white paper, and he said, you go and explain to us in simple words all these different concepts, and listed them all on the board. And then he got everyone in the room to participate in the explanation of these difficult concepts, diesel power stations, the different aspects. And it was the most powerful 45 minutes I've ever attended. We didn't have one guy just talking to us in a monotone. We had 100 people actively involved in listening and working and talking. Track non-verbal cues. That's a problem now. Carol may be staring out the window, wondering when the sun's coming out, and Willem may be talking to a friend. We don't know whether they actually cross their legs, crossing their arms. Non-verbal cues are extraordinarily important. Whenever you sit down in a meeting and you're talking to someone, watch them. If they're crossing their arms or looking away from you or refuse to give eye contact, there are issues you need to deal with. You'll probably find they're not communicating well. There's so many things there. The other one, for example, is when you communicate with someone, if you use open palm hands when you're referring to them, that's a nice warm fuzzy, but using a finger pointing at them is intimidating. So those are very important. Listen effectively and actively. I always say whenever I present a course, I've learned more from the guys on the course than I've actually presented to them, for the simple reason I try and listen as much as possible. I'm not lazy, but I try and listen. And I learned so much. Watch out for misinterpretation of words, especially with other cultures. And don't dominate. When you're talking to someone like now, it should be interactive. And we're not interactive enough as we are, as you know now. But motivating your team, just 3 here. Develop your co-workers. motivate and equip them with the knowledge and the wherewithal to be part of your team. Very important. And then finally, a few words on conflict resolution. The first thing is deal with it as quickly as possible. Root it out, deal with it, delete it before it gets out of control. And as you know, with conflict, when something goes wrong, and Carol can probably tell me whether I'm right or wrong here, when something goes wrong, you always unerringly blame the other person for the problem. When something goes, guess what? I'm the one responsible for that success. You always give yourself the accolade. That's natural human tendency. And that, of course, does cause conflict. So a few suggestions in team conflict. First thing is try and define the problem. And I always remember when I was 24 years old, that's a long time ago, Carol, we had to negotiate. We had two teams, we had to negotiate. We were given instructions for negotiating with each other. And we had to negotiate for this container load of oranges. And the negotiation was something stupid, like we were the doctors and we had to get the oranges to save the island from disease, and the other group had to get it to protect themselves, protect another group of tribesmen from getting nuclear radiation. So we both needed oranges. But the problem is no one had actually looked at the problem carefully. So we're just negotiating with each other, these two teams, for the oranges, this container load of oranges. But in fact, if we read the instructions and read exactly what the thing was, the one group needed the core of the oranges and the other group needed the skin. So it would have been a win-win solution. But of course, no one thought about looking at the problem carefully. So when you're looking at conflict, always try and look deep, drill down into the problem. Gather data, look for objective evidence. And unfortunately, most stuff, as you know from our president in the United States, when he talks about fake news, which I might add he generates a lot himself, there's so much fake news and fake evidence around. You really do need to look for objective evidence. It's very, very thin on the ground, objective stuff. Analyze the data carefully using good engineering principles. Choose the best solution, and then try and get a solution out there as quickly as possible to get rid of the conflict. And a few little suggestions with conflict. Whenever you're attacking conflict, do not attack the person. Always attack the problem. So you say, I'm not going to attack Carol. Carol, I know the problem is to do with the fact that the phone, that you need to do this and that and that and that. But I'll say, let's look at the problem, not Carol as a person. So you try and deal with the individual problem, the actual physical problem, and detach it from the person. Because as soon as you attack the person, bang, you've got a problem. You're attacking them. And then focus on what can be done. There's so much conflict resolution. You get in all these area-for-area solutions where there's no control and you're wasting your time. And try and get solutions from the people involved. And try and solve the problem, don't blame. Look, let's say, look, guys, we've got to look forward to a solution. And you may find sometimes when you're dealing with conflict that you have to say, yeah, and as Carol says, you're going to create more conflict if you attack the person. Absolutely right, because people are sensitive. Why are you attacking me? It's not me that's done the thing. It's something else. So you really try and focus on the problem. Sometimes we have to address and say, look, this has been caused by my action here. I shouldn't have done that. That's fine. Take ownership. And then try and understand the other person's point of view, although that's often with gritted teeth. You want to understand what the other person's saying, but you have to if you really want to go ahead. Really, if you want to succeed, you've got to look at the other person and then try and get out of that and think, okay, how do we resolve that problem? Show respect. And the final solution is solve the problem while building the relationship. So if you can sort of try and get the problem solved and at the same time get a warm, fuzzy relationship built, then you get the respect and support of them next time there's a problem. So, sorry about that. It's taken a bit longer than I thought. There's just a few ideas, few suggestions, and over to you, Willem. Any comments, questions, comments before you zoot into your Johannesburg morning? Carol, any comments from you?
No, I'd say thank you, Steve. It's been very, very interesting and very helpful for working through each of the steps with you. Have you got any comments at all, Willem? No questions. Okay. Anything else, Steve? Sorry, Steve, I cut you off.
Sorry, I just want to thank you, Willem and Carol. Willem, thank you very much for joining in and giving up some of your morning. I hope it's a brilliant day for you today in Johannesburg, and I hope you have a fabulous Wednesday, and as we call it here in Australia, hump day, because it's in the middle of the week, not referring to something else. So it's the middle of the week, and I hope you have a great day today, and you have a happy Thursday and Friday and a good weekend. But thank you, Carol, for choreographing it and distributing this to all our mates out there. And hope to bump into you again in the future, Willem. And obviously, Carol, I bumped into you last week in London, so maybe in a few weeks' time again. Cheers to you both, and going off to get a cup of tea. Cheers. Bye.